Imagine a night 50,000 years ago. The sun has gone down. Everything is dark. There is no phone, there is no electricity, there is no house, there is not even a room to stay in. There are only a few living humans. And they are just sitting around the fire. The fire warms them. It makes them feel safe in the darkness. They are under at least a little protection against the animals moving around nearby. But fire has something else too. Smoke. As the wind changes direction, it comes into people's faces. Tears come from their eyes. They cough. They move away from the fire. But then, one day, a different plant accidentally falls into the fire. This plant does not burn like normal wood. Its smell is different. Its smoke is different. And after breathing in that smoke, people notice something strange a few minutes later. One person calms down. One person feels dizzy. One person becomes very relaxed. And one person probably looks at the fire and thinks, "Wait a minute, what just happened?" This video is not the story of cigarettes. Because cigarettes are very new, this is the story of a much older relationship humans had with smoke. And the strange thing is this. Humans may have discovered how to consciously inhale smoke long before tobacco, before agriculture, before cities, and even before the thing we call civilization appeared, because everything started with fire. One of the strongest pieces of evidence that human ancestors used controlled fire comes from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa. Burned plant remains and bones dating back to around 1 million years ago were found there. This means that the ones sitting around the fire were not only modern humans like us. The humans who came before us were also using cigarettes. Fire cooked their food. It helped them survive on cold nights. It gave them light in the darkness. But at the same time, it caused them to breathe smoke every day for hundreds of thousands of years. And this is where the story gets interesting. Because in the ancient world, it was not only dry wood that burned in the fire. Leaves burned. Grasses burned. Sometimes plants that could affect the human mind burned too. Today, we know that when some plants burn, the smoke that appears can create different effects in the human body. But ancient humans did not explain this with chemistry. They only saw the result. The smoke of this plant made me feel bad. The smoke of this plant calmed me down. So the first smoke experience was not something conscious. Nobody sat in a cave and said, "Today, let's breathe plant smoke in a controlled way." Most likely, everything was much simpler. The wrong plant fell into the fire. Smoke spread. People felt different. And someone remembered it. That was also what made humans powerful. Something happens. Humans notice it. Then they try it again. Then they show it to someone else. Then this knowledge is passed on to every generation. There was no writing. There were no books. There was no school. But there were things told around the fire. Do not burn this plant. If you burn this plant, you sleep better. This smoke is good for a sick person. That is how smoke eventually stopped being just smoke. It turned into a sign. It turned into a ritual. Sometimes it was seen like medicine. Sometimes it became something that reduced fear. And sometimes it turned into a shared experience that brought people together around the same fire. Because for ancient humans, the group was everything. A human who was left alone would die easily. But humans who stayed together managed to survive. Sitting around the fire was not only about getting warm, it was about trusting each other. It was about looking at the same darkness. It was about knowing that you were inside the same danger. Even today, when people gather around a table, they feel closer. For ancient humans, there was no table. There was the fireside. And there was the smoke rising above the fire. Then, thousands of years passed. Humans spread to different parts of the world. Every region discovered its own plants. Some were used for treatment. Some were used in ceremonies. And some were considered special because of their mind-altering effects. Tobacco is one of the later chapters of this story. Tobacco was native to the Americas. This means ancient societies in Europe, Africa, and Asia did not know tobacco for a very long time. When Europeans arrived in the Americas in 1492, they saw indigenous people burning dried leaves and inhaling the smoke. For them, this was strange, but for the people in the Americas, this was not something new. Because tobacco use was much older than 1492, in fact, wild tobacco seeds were discovered in a roughly 12,000-year-old hearth found in Utah. This is a very big clue, because it shows that humanity's relationship with tobacco may be much older than we thought. But even so, we still cannot say this for certain. When exactly did the first human consciously inhale smoke? We do not know. And it does not seem possible for us to find out, because leaves rot, grass disappears, wood burns, plant remains mixed into the soil over thousands of years. We can find stone tools millions of years later. But most of the time, we cannot find a dry plant that an ancient human threw into a fire. That is why the evidence we have is not the whole story. It is only the small pieces that remained. But these pieces tell us this. Humans met fire in very ancient times. They lived with smoke in very ancient times. They noticed that some kinds of smoke made humans feel different. And then they did not forget this knowledge. Maybe everything did not begin with an invention. Maybe there was no plan. Maybe there was only a cold night. There was a small fire. There was a strange plant that fell into the fire. And someone who breathed that smoke suddenly felt different. Then they looked at the fire. They looked at the smoke. And they asked one of the oldest questions in human history. What happens if I do this again? Maybe that is exactly where the story of smoke began. Not with an addiction, but with curiosity, everything began.